A black German Shepherd puppy in a red baby stroller with a pacifier in his mouth. I froze, right there on the sunlit sidewalk outside a centuries-old church in Charleston, South Carolina. The stroller sat like a ghost, bright red, slightly scuffed, turned toward the morning breeze, and in it lay a puppy covered in dirt, scratches across his paws, motionless except for his eyes. He was staring straight ahead. Not at me, not at the street, just ahead. My name is Greg, and I've seen a lot in my years as a volunteer for the Charleston Animal Rescue. But this stopped my breath cold. The German Shepherd puppy didn't flinch when I approached. He didn't bark or growl or even wag his tail. He just kept the pacifier clenched between his tiny teeth, like it was the last thread tying him to something that once mattered. No collar, no leash, no owner in sight. I glanced inside the basket of the stroller. A worn-out stuffed rabbit, a folded blanket, a small note stained at the edges, taped near the baseboard with trembling handwriting. He stayed when I couldn't. He's better than me. The world tilted. What had happened here? Who left this puppy, this little black sentinel, in a stroller on a busy street? The sun reflected off the stroller's plastic handlebar, casting a red glow across the puppy's face. His eyes looked ancient. I'm not exaggerating. That tiny German Shepherd puppy had the eyes of someone who had already lived through too much. A few passers-by slowed but didn't stop. Maybe they thought it was part of a street art piece or an odd sidewalk memorial, but I knew better. I crouched beside him. "Hey, buddy, where's your person?" I whispered. No reaction, just that steady stare. I reached forward slow, careful not to spook him, but as my hand neared the handle of the stroller, his tiny frame tensed. Not aggressive, protective, like a soldier still guarding something sacred. Was he left behind or was he staying behind? I called Officer Rayner from the local precinct. We'd worked together on rescue situations before. He arrived within minutes, his cruiser lights spinning silently. "This is new," he muttered, peering into the stroller. "You ever seen something like this?" I shook my head. "No, and he's not leaving." We tried gently with food, with coaxing, with patience, but that German Shepherd puppy wouldn't budge from the stroller. Not until Officer Rayner finally lifted him carefully, respectfully, and I wrapped him in a soft blanket. Even then, he turned his head back, eyes fixed on the red stroller, as if he was afraid it might disappear without him. I carried him to my truck. He never looked at me. He just clenched the pacifier a little tighter. I didn't know what his name was yet, but I could feel it already. He wasn't lost. He had been left with a purpose. What was this puppy guarding, and why couldn't I shake the feeling that he wasn't done yet? I named him Toby on the drive to the shelter. It just felt right, like something soft enough for his silence, strong enough for the weight he seemed to carry. At the Charleston Animal Rescue Center, we have a quiet intake room in the back. Usually puppies explore, whimper, maybe even wag a little. Not Toby. This German Shepherd puppy walked in, and with a pacifier, still gently clenched in his jaw, sat down on the blanket I laid out for him and stared at the wall. He didn't eat. He didn't sniff. He didn't acknowledge the volunteers. He just laid down, curled around the stuffed rabbit I had placed beside him from the stroller, like it was his only anchor. It was unsettling. "You think he's in shock?" one of the techs asked. I nodded. But it wasn't just that. I'd seen shock before. This was different. He wasn't shut down. He was still on duty. That night I stayed late at the shelter. Around midnight I peeked through the viewing window. Toby was still there. Same spot, the rabbit tucked under one paw, the pacifier now lying beside him. His eyes never fully closed. He was waiting for whom? I couldn't let him stay in a kennel. That kind of grief. Yes, it was grief. I was sure of it now. It needed something quieter, something more human. So I signed the temporary foster release and brought him home. He didn't resist the ride, didn't move in the passenger seat, just sat there like a statue of something solemn. At my house, I laid out a soft towel and placed the rabbit and pacifier beside it. To my surprise, Toby walked straight to it, curled up and let out the smallest sound. A sigh so heavy it felt like the air shifted. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of him, he was silent, but because of what I felt in the room with us, a kind of presence that hadn't left him yet. Around 3 a.m., I heard it, a soft whimper, not loud, not panicked, but it broke me. This little German shepherd puppy was crying in his sleep, and not for himself. I knelt beside him, whispered gently, "It's okay, Toby. You're safe now." But even in dreams, he was looking for someone else. What kind of love had he lost that made him stay in that stroller like a soldier on watch? And what did it say? That he still hadn't left his post. By morning, Toby still hadn't touched his food, not even a sniff. I tried chicken broth, warm rice, even hand-fed pieces of scrambled egg. Nothing. Instead, he carried the pacifier in his mouth again, walking slowly around the room like he was retracing some old memory. I sat on the floor watching him. "What are you looking for, buddy?" I asked softly. The sun poured through the blinds, catching the edges of his black fur and casting a long shadow behind him. A 4-month-old German Shepherd puppy shouldn't carry this kind of weight, but Toby did. Later that day, I brought him back to the shelter for a checkup. The vet gave him a clean bill of health. No fever, no infections, just a few healing scratches and signs of mild dehydration. "Physically, he's fine," she said, "but emotionally, he's somewhere else entirely." On a hunch, I brought the red stroller from where it had been stored in the shelter's garage. I parked it just outside the play area, curious to see what he'd do. Toby stopped in his tracks. He didn't run to it. He didn't whimper. He just walked up, sat down beside it, and placed the pacifier inside like he was returning something sacred. I felt the breath leave my chest. This wasn't just memory. This was ritual. We all carry grief in different ways. Some scream, some collapse. Toby, he remembered, he held on. That night I made a decision. No more kennel. No half answers. I was going to find out who left him. Not for justice, but for understanding. I posted a photo on the shelter social media. A black German Shepherd puppy lying beside a red baby stroller. The caption read, "Does anyone recognize this puppy or this stroller?" Found near St. Paul's Church, downtown Charleston. The post went viral within hours. Shares poured in. People commented things like, "This is hauntingly beautiful. And there's a story behind those eyes." Then came a message from someone named Dana. "I used to see a woman downtown with a black puppy in a stroller. She always sat outside the hospital. I thought she was a new mom, but now I'm not so sure." My hands trembled as I replied, "Could it be that the stroller was never meant for a baby at all? Could Toby have been someone's only way to keep living after they lost everything? And if so, who was he still waiting for?" Her name was Claw. It took 3 more messages, 2 phone calls, and a volunteer who remembered her face. Claire was in her early 30s, quiet, kind. She'd often be seen near the children's wing of the hospital, sitting on a bench with a stroller, the same red one, and a black German Shepherd puppy always curled at her feet. She wasn't a mother. She had been one. The story unraveled in whispers like an old photograph peeling back its corners. Claire had lost her baby, stillbirth 7 months in. No warning, no answers, just silence where there should have been life. Her world stopped. But Toby was already there. She'd adopted him a week before the tragedy, hoping he'd grow up with her daughter. Instead, he became her lifeline. This German Shepherd puppy went everywhere with her. When Claire couldn't face the nursery, he laid at the door. When she cried on the porch, he leaned into her chest. When she bought a pacifier and a stuffed rabbit, she tucked them in the stroller and pushed Toby gently through the park like grief, pretending to be okay. People thought she was strange. Some smiled, some whispered, but Toby never judged her. He walked proudly beside that red stroller every single day, like he knew it wasn't just about walks, but holding together what little was left of her heart. Then came the day she didn't come home. No accident, no ambulance, just the stroller, left by the church steps. And Toby, still inside, waiting. It was her way of saying goodbye. She let go. The hospital receptionist told me over the phone, voice trembling. But that puppy, he didn't. Back at my house, I sat on the floor while Toby lay curled next to the rabbit. I whispered, "I know, buddy. I know you miss her." He blinked slowly, then did something he hadn't done in days. He placed his head on my leg, not heavy, not needy, present. It was the first time he'd let himself touch someone without looking back. Later that night, he howled, not loud but long, a low, aching sound that filled the quiet like candle smoke. I didn't try to stop him. It was morning. It was memory. And somehow it was love. This wasn't a puppy who needed rescue. This was a puppy who had given rescue. And I realized maybe he was still trying to. The next morning I found Toby lying by the front door, staring at it like he expected Claire to walk through at any moment. The pacifier was between his paws, the rabbit tucked neatly beside him. He hadn't moved all night. I sat on the floor across from him, coffee in hand, trying to make sense of how a 4-month-old German Shepherd puppy could carry such deep sorrow and such loyalty. I opened my laptop and pulled up the shelter's post again. Over 18,000 shares now, hundreds of comments, but one caught my eye. I think I saw her a few months ago outside the grief counseling center. She used to sit alone with the puppy in her lap. I thought she was just resting. Another, she never said a word. But that puppy, he never left her side. I scrolled through messages, piecing together a mosaic of moments. People who'd passed Claire in parks, by the hospital, outside church steps. Every memory included Toby. No leash, just presence, just connection. I stared at him. Toby, you were her whole world, weren't you? His ears twitched at my voice. Slowly, he lifted his head. Those eyes, deep, unreadable, not just sad but patient, met mine. That afternoon, I took him to a quiet garden near the hospital just to sit, just to be. As we walked in, Toby slowed. He sniffed the wind. Then, for the first time, he pulled the leash forward gently, leading us past a fountain, down a winding stone path, into a wooden bench shaded by an old oak tree. He sat beside it. No whimper, no sound. He simply stared at the empty bench like he'd returned to a memory. A nurse walked by and stopped. I remember that puppy, she said softly. That woman used to sit right there. She didn't talk to anyone, but he sat like that, like he understood everything. We stayed there for almost an hour. Toby never moved, and something in me shifted. This German Shepherd puppy wasn't just grieving. He was still serving, still waiting to be useful, to bring calm to someone else's storm. That night, I filled out an application for a therapy dog program. I wasn't sure if they'd accept a puppy so young, but Toby, he was already doing the work. When I clicked submit, I looked down at him. You ready for something new, buddy? He rested his head on my foot. Maybe he couldn't save Claire, but what if his purpose didn't end with her? What if he was still meant to carry love forward? The first time Toby walked into the therapy dog evaluation center, the room fell silent. Other dogs barked, pulled at leashes, wagged nervously. But Toby, this 4-month-old black German Shepherd puppy, walked in like he'd done it 100 times, calm, still observing. He didn't look like a puppy, he looked like a presence. The trainer, a woman named Melissa, with 20 years of experience in trauma response canines, knelt in front of him and extended her hand. Toby didn't jump, didn't lick. He sat, watched her face, and then placed the pacifier, which he had carried in that day, softly in her palm. She looked up at me speechless. I didn't teach him that, I said. That's all him. We moved through the evaluation. Toby passed every station with quiet grace, unexpected for a dog his age. When a toddler dropped a toy and burst into tears, Toby didn't flinch. He approached slowly, sat beside her, and simply leaned in until she stopped crying. Then he stayed. Melissa turned to me afterward. He's not trained, she whispered. He's called. I knew what she meant. The pacifier, the rabbit, the stroller. They weren't props. They were Toby's history, his memory of love, and somehow his gift. We started visiting nursing homes and children's centers twice a week. No command needed. Toby always knew where to go. Once at the pediatric oncology ward, a boy named Sam refused to speak, wouldn't eat, wouldn't even make eye contact with the nurses. Toby walked in, sat beside his bed, and slowly nudged the stuffed rabbit toward him. Sam touched it, then reached for Toby's fur. then smiled for the first time in days. Later, one of the nurses said, "That puppy just opened a door we couldn't find." And again I thought of Claire, of how she must have sat on those benches with the same silence, the same emptiness, and how Toby held space for her pain wordlessly, faithfully. Now he was doing it for others. This German Shepherd puppy, once left in a stroller with a note, was building bridges between broken hearts. He didn't play like other dogs, he didn't chase balls or chew bones, but give him someone grieving, and he became whole. Toby wasn't healing from trauma. He was healing for everyone else. It was a cloudy Saturday morning when we got the call. A young mother had come into the shelter, not to adopt, but just to talk. She'd lost her baby during childbirth 6 weeks earlier. Her husband had returned to work. Family had flown home. And the house, she said, had become unbearable. "I just wanted to be near animals," she told the front desk volunteer. "I don't want to talk. I just want to sit." I was in the back with Toby sorting supplies for an upcoming fundraiser when the shelter manager poked her head in. "Greg, I think you should bring him out here." Toby didn't need direction. He walked beside me into the front room, stopped just inside the doorway, and looked at her. She was sitting on the bench by the window, arms wrapped around herself, eyes glassy. He walked forward, slow, careful, and laid the pacifier at her feet. She stared. For a second, I thought she didn't understand. But then she bent down, picked it up, and whispered, "I used to have one just like this in the diaper bag." Tears rolled down her face. Toby pressed his side gently against her knee, then lowered his head onto her lap. She didn't pull away. She let out a sound, not quite a sob, not quite a breath, and finally leaned forward, folding herself around him. They stayed like that for 20 minutes. When she finally looked up, her voice cracked. "What's his name?" "Toby," I said softly. "He was left behind too." She nodded. "He understands." Later, after she left, I stood in the doorway of the quiet room, watching Toby rest beside the rabbit and pacifier like always. But something had changed. He wasn't just waiting anymore. He was giving. He had become a vessel, not just of memory, but of connection. Somehow, this German Shepherd puppy had learned the language of loss and turned it into something gentle. That night, I took him back to the church steps where I first found him. We sat beside the spot where the red stroller had been. Toby sniffed the bricks, circled once, and laid down, calm, not restless, not watching, just still. The wind was soft. The same bench across the street sat empty. "You did good, Toby." I said she would be proud. And for the first time since I'd met him, Toby wagged his tail. Not fast, not wild, just once. He didn't move on. He moved forward with love. The shelter applied for a special feature in the Charleston Post and Courier, a series highlighting therapy animals changing lives across South Carolina. They asked if Toby could be included. I wasn't sure at first. Part of me wanted to protect his quiet story, to let him keep offering comfort without flash or attention. But another part, the part that watched a grieving mother exhale for the first time in weeks, knew that sharing his journey might help more than just the people he met in person. So I agreed. The day the photographer came, Toby sat patiently under the oak tree in the garden behind the shelter. He had his stuffed rabbit beside him. The pacifier hung from his collar by a soft ribbon. Not for show, but because he always wanted it close. The article went live on a Wednesday. The title read, "Toby, the puppy who stayed when the world let go." Within days, emails and letters poured in. Parents, veterans, nurses, grief counselors. Even a chaplain from the Children's Hospital wrote, "I don't know this puppy, but I feel like he knows me." We started getting requests from hospice centers, women's shelters, schools, places where pain lives quietly. Toby went, always gently, always silently. At one visit to a trauma recovery program for teens, a 17-year-old girl sat cross-legged on the floor, arms folded tight. When Toby approached, she looked away, but he didn't force it. He simply lay down at a distance, placed the rabbit beside himself, and waited. 10 minutes later, she scooted closer, whispered, "Can I pet him?" I nodded. She reached out, brushing his fur with hesitant fingers. "He's so quiet," she said. "He knows what silence feels like," I told her. She looked down. Me too. And just like that, a wall came down. This German Shepherd puppy didn't need commands or training tricks. He carried something deeper, the ability to sit in pain without needing to fix it. I began to realize something I hadn't before. Toby wasn't just surviving Claw's loss. He was translating it. He was carrying the weight she couldn't and giving it to those who needed it most. One night, I sat with him on the back porch watching the stars. He curled beside me, head heavy on my foot. "I used to be a teacher, you know," I whispered. "But I think you've taught more people in 6 weeks than I did in 10 years. He didn't move, but I like to think he heard me, because sometimes the best teachers don't speak. They simply stay. The call came from a women's wellness center downtown. One of the counselors had read the article about Toby and asked if we could visit during their weekly support group for mothers navigating postpartum grief. Toby had never been in a room that full before, at least not with that much pain in the air. 12 women, all seated in a circle. Some cradled blankets, others wore hospital bands still wrapped around their wrists. The counselor explained that they weren't required to talk, just to sit, share space, maybe breathe for a while. Toby walked in slowly, not rushed, not distracted. His steps were almost deliberate. He paused by each woman just for a second, letting them see him, smell him, choose him, and then he made his choice. He padded over to the woman seated furthest from the group. She hadn't made eye contact with anyone. Her arms were tightly folded, her chin pressed down into her chest. Toby didn't nudge, didn't lick. He just laid down at her feet and set the pacifier gently on her shoe. She didn't move. For a long while, the room was silent. Then she started crying quietly, without gasping or sobbing. The kind of cry that leaks out after you've held it in too long. She reached down, fingers trembling, and brushed Toby's fur. "He reminds me of." She couldn't finish. She didn't have to. The other women leaned forward, some placing their hands over their hearts, others wiping away tears of their own. Toby stayed. This German Shepherd puppy, still not even 5 months old, sat in the middle of that pain like it was holy ground. He didn't fear it. He honored it. By the end of the session, every woman had touched him. One left the room holding the rabbit against her chest. Another asked if she could volunteer at the shelter. And the quiet one, she stayed after, sitting on the floor beside Toby, just breathing. "Did he lose someone too?" she asked. I nodded. "Someone he never stopped loving." She looked at me with eyes that had finally softened. "Maybe that's why I trust him." On the drive home, Toby fell asleep in the passenger seat, the pacifier resting under his chin like a pillow. And I realized something. He wasn't just offering comfort. He was reminding people that they still deserved it. Toby wasn't here to erase grief. He was here to witness it, to prove that even in our worst moments, love doesn't leave. It just lies quietly beside us until we're ready to feel it again. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. The Charleston Community Wellness Center was hosting an open event for families dealing with loss. There were booths, therapy groups, and speakers, but the crowd was quiet, the kind that speaks in lowered voices and carries grief like an invisible weight. Toby and I were invited to sit in the children's wing. The idea was simple. Let the little ones pet the puppy while their parents attended the sessions nearby. But Toby had his own plan. He tugged on the leash, gently but firmly, guiding me away from the reading circle and toward the far corner of the room. There, sitting alone by the window, was a woman in her late 30s. Her shoulders were hunched forward, her face turned toward the glass. As we got closer, I noticed she was holding a photograph, a baby girl, less than a year old. Her hands trembled. Toby slowed, then sat, and then, as if rehearsed 1,000 times, he did what he always did when it mattered most. He placed the pacifier at her feet. She looked down and broke. She covered her face, the photo slipping to the floor, and sobbed. Not the quiet, tearful kind, but the kind that shakes the whole body, that pulls years of pain up from the roots. I stepped forward, but stopped because Toby was already there. He didn't climb on her, didn't lick her face. He just leaned into her legs and pressed his head softly against her side, like a memory choosing to stay. She wrapped her arms around his neck and cried into his fur. And when she finally looked up at me, eyes swollen, voice cracking, she whispered something I'll never forget. "I haven't touched anyone in 3 months. not even my husband. But he let me breathe again. Later, one of the grief counselors approached me. "What you've got there," she said, nodding toward Toby, "is not just a therapy dog. That puppy just did in 5 minutes what we couldn't do in 6 months." The next week, Toby was officially certified as an emotional support animal through the state's trauma response program. His name was printed on the certificate beside mine, but I didn't feel like his owner. I felt like his witness. He wasn't just a German Shepherd puppy anymore. He was a vessel of memory, of healing, of something sacred that couldn't be taught or trained. Back at home, I placed the certificate in a frame right next to a photo of the red stroller, still and silent on the church sidewalk. Toby lay nearby, resting beside the stuffed rabbit, the pacifier now a little worn and weathered. But he kept it close, always, not as a toy, as a promise. These days, Toby walks beside me into places I never imagined I'd return to. Hospice centers, recovery homes, grief circles where silence used to rule the air. But when Toby enters, something changes. It's like the room exhales. He doesn't wag his tail like other dogs. He doesn't beg for attention. He offers it quietly, reverently, the way only someone who's lived through loss can. At the shelter, new volunteers come and go. Some don't understand at first. "He doesn't play," they ask. "He doesn't have to," I say. He listens. Toby now visits the shelter twice a week, not for himself, but for the others. He lies next to the scared ones, the ones trembling in corners or growling out of fear, especially the puppies who've just been surrendered, confused and broken. Toby never barks. He just sits near them, sometimes placing his rabbit beside them like a peace offering. Last week, a new mom brought in her 6-year-old daughter, Mia. The girl was quiet, eyes darting between every kennel. Her brother had died 6 months before in a car accident. She hadn't spoken since. Toby approached slowly, sat beside her. She didn't move, but then he did something I'd never seen him do. He rolled onto his side, reached out with a paw, and tapped her knee. Mia looked down, blinked, then she smiled. It was small but real. "He's funny," she said. Her mother broke into tears on the spot. It wasn't just what Toby did. It was who he was. This German Shepherd puppy had become something I didn't have a word for. More than a pet, more than a companion. He was a bridge between silence and sound, between loss and life, between those who had given up and those still holding on. At night, he curls on the same blanket in my living room, pacifier tucked beneath his chin like a soldier resting between missions. Sometimes I catch him staring at the front door, still waiting. Not for Claire, but maybe for someone else who needs him next. And I think that's the most extraordinary part. He never stopped being loyal. He just learned how to carry that loyalty from one broken heart to another, with love, with memory, with purpose. Toby wasn't just a rescue story. He was a chapter in someone's grief and a whole book in someone else's healing. And this little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility. It's pet care. It's listening when there are no words, staying when others can't, and giving when nothing is left. Toby never forgot where he came from. He never let go of the love he once knew. But instead of being trapped by it, he turned it into something powerful, something quiet. Every person he touches carries a piece of that stroller, that rabbit, that pacifier, and somehow that love Claire gave him lives on in all of them. Toby taught me something no classroom ever could. The ones who've been broken are often the ones who know best how to help others heal. If this story touched your heart, please share it. Every share helps us save another life like Toby's. Don't forget to subscribe our YouTube family, The Animals 2.0.